for being here. I'm Rania Mancario, CEO of Crime Stoppers of Houston, and today I'm honored to welcome all of you to our Crime Stoppers building and to express my sincerest gratitude to the Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg and her office for partnering with us to put on this event for the National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Today marks the 50th anniversary of the Red Elementary School shooting, a tragic incident that took place in Houston, leaving many innocent lives lost and several injured. We remember those who lost their lives in this senseless act of violence, and we stand in solidarity with the survivors and families who continue to carry on the scars of that tragic day. I would also like to take a moment to thank the victims who are in the room with us today, Ms. Shirley Watley and Lynn Tucker. We are grateful for their courage in sharing their stories with us and for being a part of this event. Your strength is an inspiration to us all. We thank you for being here as we honor the victims of this tragedy and discuss new and innovative ways to better advocate for victims of violence in the future. Such important work, and we're very, very honored to do this. With that, I'd like to introduce Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg.
Thank you, Rania. Well, you all, thank you. Join me in giving Rania a big round of applause. Andy Kahn, Crime Victims Advocate, and all the employees of Crime Stoppers. Would you please stand to be recognized? That was a stand, Andy. Andy's not big on credit. We got to get it where we can get it to him. I also want to take a moment during Victims' Rights Week to thank the members of the Harris County District Attorney's Office and to tell you why they are so important to me. In 1962, my mother was kidnapped in a violent crime by a serial rapist, and there were no victim services at that time, same as there were no victim services when Red Elementary School mass shooting occurred. And now we do have victim services. We've made a little bit of headway. And I just want to tell you a little bit about our victim services division. You know it's important to me because it could have helped my mother. When I was a young prosecutor, I saw so many victims who our small victim services division were able to help, and it did help them. Any kind of shepherd through the justice system, something that is foreign to crime victims who did not choose to be in the system, is helpful. But I want to tell you where our victims assistance group has come, what we've come to. First of all, we put a chief felony prosecutor, Celeste Byram, in charge. Celeste Byram chose and has added to our staff through grants a number of outstanding qualified victim assistance coordinators who now contact crime victims within the first 72 hours if you are a victim of violent crime and when possible. This means that we are there for you earlier. And having lived with a crime victim all my life, I think that that alone builds confidence in someone who doesn't know what to do or where to go. And in a time when we see much focus on defendants and their rights, our office remains committed to the rights of crime victims. That's my personal and professional background. I was trained by people like Bert Graham at the DA's office. I'm joined by really talented, hardworking people who respect crime victims and who want to make our world safer so that we have fewer crime victims. We all thank you and honor the victims who are present because it's your courage and your willingness to speak out and advocate for others that will change our system again, just like we have changed it for the better in the past. So as we get ready to meet the victims of what may be Houston's first mass school shooting. While it didn't happen in the campus, it happened to the students and the parents of Red Elementary School. So before we do that, if I could just ask you to recognize our staff at the District Attorney's Office. Would everybody who works at the District Attorney's Office in victim services or in our leadership or our former leadership, Mr. Graham, would everyone please stand up? All right, well, that is who we are. And now you're going to hear from the people who you need to hear from. The surviving family members and survivors themselves of the Red Elementary School mass shooting. We now see our FBI define mass shootings as 4 or more. But what you'll hear is that the shooter in this case shot and killed 4 people. He shot more who were injured, and one of whom is here. But there was no definition of serial killer at the time. There was no definition of spree killer, mass shooter. We see this now happening, and we think it's new. It's not. It's not. But we took action to fix things before, and this is a call to action from every professional and every crime victim in the room. Let's use Crime Victims' Rights Week. Let's use the focus on you to get the perspective of law-abiding people out there who just want to be safe in your homes, in your schools. You just want a good, safe quality of life for your families. Let's pull together for your rights, not just this week, but every week. And now it's my pleasure to introduce somebody who I've talked to you about, Celeste Byram, the director of our Crime Victim Services Division. Celeste?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this year's Harris County District Attorney's Office National Crime Victims' Rights Week event. And special thank you to Crime Stoppers for being such gracious hosts here. Every year is a unique opportunity for us to reflect on how we can best engage and serve victims, survivors, and next of kin of violent crimes. This year is particularly dear to me because of the relationships I have developed over the past couple of years and past couple of months with these survivors from the incident that happened 50 years ago. But how did we end up here? How did we come up with this for this year's Victims' Rights event? Well, have to go back 2 years. 2 years ago, I got a phone call from a longtime career prosecutor who had retired named Burt Graham. Burt Graham is someone that when I came up in the DA's office had been a great mentor and provided great leadership, so I was happy to hear from him. Burt Graham asked if I would be willing to meet with him and a survivor named Karen Kurtz to come up with a plan to protest the parole of a violent man named Larry Casey, a man who committed an unthinkable and deadly act of violence and later solicited the capital murder of Burt and Officer David Sheets in retaliation for prosecuting his crimes. During our meeting, I learned for the first time about a tragic page from Houston's history, a page that most of us were unaware of and knew very little about. On the afternoon of April 18th of 1973, 86-year-old Beulah Davis was standing in her driveway. 5-year-old Claire Jakubowski was riding her bike in front of her home. Children Karen Kurtz, Jana Watley, and Lynn Tucker were all walking home from Red Elementary School. A normal day by any standards, until things changed in an instant. Because earlier that day, Larry Casey had got into a fight with his girlfriend. And in response to that, he decided to do the absolutely unthinkable. In moments, Casey committed an incomprehensible act of gun violence that took away the lives of Beulah Davis, Claire Jakubowski, and Jana Watley. Karen Kurtz and Lynn Tucker were badly injured, and their lives were forever altered. We are gathered here 50 years later to remember those lives that were lost and to celebrate the resilience of the survivors who are here today to share their experiences and messages so that we, as a society, as victim advocates, as members of the community, as members of the Harris County District Attorney's Office, can learn how to better support victims of violent crime. I want to recognize the following victims, survivors, and next of kin who are present here today. Mrs. Shirley Watley, the mother of victim Jana Watley. Lynn Tucker, survivor. Karen Kurtz, survivor. Burt Graham, who prosecuted the criminal case and was himself the victim of Casey's solicitation of capital murder. And David Sheets, retired HPD officer, who had handled Casey in the past and was also a victim of Casey's solicitation of capital murder. We are also joined by several people special guests that I would like to recognize. Libby Hamilton, victim advocate for the Board of Pardons and Paroles. She has worked tirelessly for years working with victims, particularly in the post-conviction victim advocacy process, and is currently the victim advocate for the Board of Pardons and Paroles, who has been working with the survivors and next of kin in this case. Donna Owens, who is an alumni of Red Elementary School and a particular friend of Karen Kurtz. She is here today representing the alumni. Cornelia Greer from Red Elementary School. Thank you for being here. And Karen Klein of Hope Animal Assisted Crisis Response, one of our most beloved community partners for the comfort and joy that they bring during difficult times. I hope that you will listen to all of their messages here today, and I hope that we can all find something meaningful going forward. Thank you. This time, I would invite Ms. Shirley Watley to come speak.
Thank you all very much for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. As Mrs. Byron told you, my name is Shirley Watley, and the mother of Jana Watley, whose life was taken 50 years ago in April of 1973 as part of what is now called the Red School shootings. There was the 5-year-old little girl riding her tricycle in front of her house, and the grandmother, Miss Beulah, 83 years old, went out to pick up her newspaper. And then there was my daughter, 10 years old. I know some of you can't hear me. I speak pretty softly. Is this better? Okay. Jana was walking home with a new friend of hers, Laura. Went to examine some new puppies that Jana knew about. And then there was the two schoolmates that were seriously injured, and one of them permanently injured. They carry the physical pain of that bullet every single day since. There were others that were seriously impacted and still have very strong emotional problems such as PTSD, and my son being among them, as well as numerous others. These kids, along with their schoolmates, were walking home after school with thoughts of plans for the long Easter weekend, all shattered with the sound of gunshots and screams and sirens. Over the years, many of these children are now grown up. There's some of them here, and they have expressed thoughts, loving and kind thoughts of my daughter over, and I appreciated them so much, and they've meant a lot to me, and I thank all of you. Jana was a beautiful, vivacious 10-year-old who loved to play Barbie dolls. with her friends and was in her element as a member of the school's drill team, the Raiderettes, which Donna was a part of also. She was also in the children's choir at our church. She was close to her younger brother and sister, and they miss her very much and still share many memories of her. There's something about someone who is willing to take a human life, whether physically or mentally impairing it. It is an act that carries very strong emotional scars for a lifetime. It is a rippling effect. There's some homes that were divided up and marriages ending in divorce. Some people, when they got the news, either had a stroke or a heart attack or even lost an infant in miscarriage. There needs to be a stiffer and swifter sentencing against the person who commits such crimes as this and other school and multi-shootings. The reality of the crime doesn't end when the person is sentenced to 99 years in prison, when after a good portion of the sentence is served with good behavior, the prisoner is considered for parole, and the parole board will write to us and ask us how we feel about it. And then this starts the pain and the fear again. We relive it. Just when we're learning to live with it, we become victims again. In our finite our finite minds, each time we come up, that they come up for parole, which is every 3 years now, we let the board know whether or not they should be freed and why. We know that we don't want this particular person freed to injure or kill someone else. He has tried a second time in 2008 for planning a murder for hire while in prison. So it has apparent that he hadn't changed. And I believe that we all agree that far too many shootings are happening across the country. Next year, 2024, is an election year, and we need to pay closer attention to where the candidates are standing in regards to the laws of the sales of guns. There seems to be too many red flags being ignored or overlooked, and nothing says you can't cross a party line for a candidate who speaks for strong attention to the responsibilities of those selling the guns. I also think each school across the country needs full-time security and patrolling, extending to daycare and preschoolers. None of our children seem to be safe. I want to leave this last thought. The day Jana was killed, a doctor was sent to our home to give us a very strong sedative for us to sleep, but it didn't work on me. I was restless and sleep wouldn't come. I began to pray and confessed to God that I couldn't bear this tragedy on my own. I confessed that I needed Him to help me bear the pain as the Bible had said He would. Immediately, after I prayed, there was tranquility that was washed over me, and I felt a calm. God had heard my prayer, and He was there all along. That didn't mean my tears had stopped or that I let my other 2 children walk to and from school. No, I cried for months, and I took my children to school or had them carpooled with a neighbor my heart was froze when a car backfired or I heard a siren. And I would do a quick check on my children. And that then, through the years, I've realized that I was the one keeping myself from healing by holding on to the pain. I knew all along that what I had to do was surrender my pain to God and turn my thoughts to happier memories of her. We shouldn't hold on to the couldas, wouldas, shouldas, and what-ifs. They don't do us any good. All they do is harm. In the Bible, 1 Peter 5:7 says, "Cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you." And Philippians 4:7 says, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." And these verses are what have helped me through the years. Thank you very much.
Next, survivor Lynn Pepper.
I am Lynn Tucker. I'm not experienced in speaking in front of people, so I'm hoping the words that I want to say will help. I have a request and an idea. And the request is in regards to the parole letters. And yes, it happens every 3 years now, and it's really hard. And so I ask that all of you consider signing up to be advised of when that happens, and that when you get your letter or your email, that you remember this day and why we're here, and remember all of us together, as well as think about Claire and Jana and Beulah, and consider writing a letter to express your feelings about the idea of someone like him being given parole. So yeah, 50 years ago, I was walking home from school, and a car pulled up to the curb next to the yard that I was cutting across, because it was at a corner, and I heard somebody say, "Hey," and I looked over, and he pulled a rifle up to the window, and so I turned around and ran, because I thought about a book that my mom had read to me called Never Talk to Strangers. So he shot me in the back. It looks like it's right on my spine, but it came out my side and went through my arm, because I was running real hard. And I don't know that I need to go through the whole story, but that's the kind of person he is, as a little girl running away from him because he had a gun and he shot me anyway. It did not, I was no danger to him, and he didn't know me either. I suppose every survivor is different in the way that they do it, and I did it by going as far away as I could and trying never to think about it, except for when we were asked to write letters. And so I didn't talk to too many people about it either, because that was no fun, because it would just upset people, because they didn't, felt too close to know somebody who had been through that. It was very uncommon back then, but not so much now. And so anyway, I didn't have to start talking to other people about it until all my letter writers got older, and a lot of them passed away, the people that knew the story in the first place. And I have to tell the story to be able to get friends and family to help do that. And the way I phrase it when I ask them to help is to consider it a community service, because this man not only has grudges against some of us individuals, but if he were to be let out, the first danger he would be to is whatever community he lives in. And so that means like all of us could be in danger, anybody, anywhere. So yeah, so that's the request, if you would consider writing letters when he comes up for parole. And the other thing was an idea that I had as I read a couple of books. One is about, it's called Children Under Fire. It's about gun violence in America. And another one was about trauma. And then I was, seeing headlines all the time about how children were getting, killed so often. And I came up with this idea from all of that together, and I don't know, other things that I forgot to talk about. And I wondered, like Karen and I have a very unusual relationship. We weren't friends before this happened, but we're able to talk about things and kind of understand each other in a way that's different than any other person in my life that I can talk to about it. And so I thought, well, that would be super to have like a network of there's something where matches like that can be made, a one-to-one friendship relationship of victims that have gone through this particular type of violence, to be able to talk to each other or not talk to each other, or just have a friendship relationship together that is supportive and nurturing and helpful in a way that psychiatry and therapists and family and other things cannot be. So I asked around if there was anything like that, and I haven't heard that there is. So if anybody is interested in talking to me about that idea and seeing if we can do something, I would love to talk afterwards. And thank you.
We are greatly appreciative of both of you. Thank you for being here today. Next, we have a presentation from Karen Klein. She is our contact at Hope Animal Assisted Crisis Response. She will be speaking today about the program that Hope provides and what they do in our community and other communities around the country. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Celeste. As she said, my name is Karen Klein, and I am the Regional Manager for Hope Animal Assisted Crisis Response for the Central Gulf Coast. In May 1998 in Springfield, Oregon, a tragic shooting by a Thurston High School student left 25 injured and 4 students dead. In response to the struggling horror that everybody had gone through, National Organization for Victim Assistance came in to support the school, and with them they brought 2 therapy dogs. These therapy dogs went to work comforting the students and the staff, and the mental health counselors were just amazed at how the response was to the dogs, that they weren't responding to the people and the counselors that were there. This tragic event led to Hope Animal Assisted Crisis Response. Since Hope has grown into a national organization, all volunteer nonprofit, with specially trained handlers and canines providing comfort and encouragement to those who have been through tragedy or disaster. Hope Comfort Dogs provide a specialized skill set during the recovery that is unique and very simple. It's something that people can't do, and it's easy to explain. They provide an unqualified and appropriate opportunity to smile. So much of the time when we have gone through, when we're going through the recovery phase, it's all about significant loss and how are we going to come back from what we've done. And the presence of a comfort dog provides an opportunity to unplug from all that just for a minute and take a deep breath and smile. Scientific evidence has shown that animals are a positive in helping people cope with traumatic events. These simple interactions show the survivors and emergency responders that they are supported and we care. So during our 3-day certification training, it consists of a lot of essential things that we need to work with victims and all their skill sets. Our teams consist of a dog and a handler. We go through mental health first aid. We go through all kinds of training that will help us work with agencies that call us out. And we are not there to be a burden, but an asset. So we do not self-deploy. We are requested to come. We're given instructions as to what to do, and we are kind of on the sidelines, and we don't want to be a bother. We're there to help support schools, first responders, victim advocates, Red Cross, NOVA, FEMA. On a national level, as we are a national organization, HOPE went to 9/11. We've done recovery at Hurricane Katrina, the Virginia Tech shooting, many police officer and first responder memorials. We were at the Navy Yard when they had the Washington Navy Yard shooting. We were at Yarnell when the 19 firefighters died fighting that fire. We were in Boulder when we had the King Super shootings up there. We were in Surfside when the apartment collapse came. Locally, our Texas teams, which I have 5 of them here, support Celeste and her office with victims. And we can go to the court with them. We've had our dogs in the court in the witness box with them, supporting them as they've had to testify and relive their traumatic event. We work very closely with Houston Police Department in our debriefings when they've had, a horrific shooting or something that's happened with them. We go in and support them during debriefings. We go to all shift changes. When there's been those types of things, we were at Santa Fe shooting, Yes Prep shooting. So we are here to help you. And we're here to help the victims. And we have come so far with victim advocates and victim assistance, which we did not have in '73 or before. And we have come so far with the help of Celeste and her office and all the other victim advocates that are there. And we are here to support you in any way we can. So please enjoy our dogs, and that's what we're here for. And thank you for having us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen. I greatly appreciate it. Hope is always a bright spot when we have the opportunity to have our canine victim advocates join us in the courtroom and beyond. So thank you. At this time, I will turn it back to Rania, who has some words to say about exciting programs that Crime Stoppers has to help our community.
Thank you. It's very hard to come after those precious puppies and dogs. So today is about a problem, but also about a solution, and that is where Crime Stoppers really wants to step in. What are solutions that we can offer to the community? I'll share a very quick story. I'm a mom of 3, and I remember when my youngest was in early before actual school, she said to me, "Mommy, today we learned about drop down and go low." And I said, we call her Red, and I said, "Red, do you mean stop, drop, and roll like if there's a fire?" And she said, "No, Mommy, today we learned about drop down and go low." And I said, "Well, when do you do drop down and go low?" She said, "Well, if a bad man enters the school and the teacher flips the smiley face by the door from green to red or red to green, we know to be really quiet and drop down and go low." So I said, "Okay, Evelyn." And she showed me what drop down. It's sort of like a crawl, knees and elbows. So I knew at that moment that my little girl, before even kindergarten, was being trained for active shooter. And a lot of the parents at the time knew my affiliation with Crime Stoppers, and they called me and said, "Aren't you furious that the school is teaching this?" I said, "I'm furious that my children are being raised in a community and in a society and in a time and place where they need to know this." But I'll tell you, Lynn said something so important, and everybody here said something so important. What really struck me is she said, "When the car pulled up, I remembered a book so much we can do through education. The chaos that comes with an active shooter is also a blessing to the shooter. But if we can train ourselves on what to do, if we can remove the chaos and the panic and immediately go to action, lives will be saved. So Crime Stoppers offers free programming kindergarten to 12th grade in partnership with the schools. We are also, of course, in the adult community. We talk about every aspect of active shooters and how to stay safe. We do this in partnership with JetBlue. We offer it year-round. We've reached over 14,000 kids through this education because we know that this is a real threat and a real issue. We were just saying that in the wake of something like Uvalde, everybody says, where are the answers? We're here trying to provide answers and solutions before. And I'll also add, before I hand it to Andy Kahn, the Crime Stopper Safe School program started under the leadership of District Attorney Kim Ogg when she was the Executive Director of Crime Stoppers. And their work in the schools, middle schools and high schools, was so effective that they started figuring out a way to remove weapons from schools before they could ever be used against a student. We carry on that work today. Over 280 weapons have been removed from Houston area schools before there could ever be a tragedy. Thank you. Ms. Watley talked about the importance of the parole hearing and how difficult it is to share the story. We've heard the importance of the letters, and Andy Kahn, our Director of Victim Services, is now going to share with you what he has been doing as a solution in this specific area. Andy.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services, Victim Advocacy, Crime Stoppers of Houston. No, I was told to stand in front of here by Sydney. And I listened to Sydney. If I didn't listen to Sydney, you know what would happen. I'll just tell you a little background on, I've been working with parole hearings, I'll age myself, for 28 some odd years. It was 1997, I was with a member of Parents of Murdered Children, the late great Madonna Petrucca, on the murder of her son-in-law. And I contacted the parole board member and said, we would like to meet with you. This was 1997, okay? And I was up there, and I'll never forget, because the parole board member leaned over and said to me, you know, Andy, we're just meeting you out of courtesy. We don't have to do this. And I smiled. I don't smile too often. And I said, you know what? I'm going to remove the word courtesy. I'm going to get a bill filed. I'm going to pass legislation that mandates that the parole board must meet with a victim's family at their request. That was 1997. That got passed and signed into law. Years later, as some of you might recall here, and you've heard it alluded to, of this never-ending parole process. And once you're in it, it's kind of like a black hole. You're there for life. We had it changed where violent offenders, if they're denied parole, the parole board has discretion anywhere from 1 to 5 years. It never made any sense to me why we were repeatedly doing these things every year. We got that passed. And then in 2015, House Bill 1914, how I remember this is another story in itself. House Bill 1914 dealt with cases like Larry Casey, in which capital murder defendants, for whatever reason, capital murder defendants were being reviewed at a maximum of every 3 years. So you had serial killers like Elmer Wayne Henley and David Brooks, who were responsible for the murder of at least 28 young boys who had been through over 20 parole reviews during their tenure in prison. Now let's be real. You're not going to parole a serial killer unless you have a career death. It's just not going to happen. But why we were going through these repetitive hearings made zero sense. So I did some background research and found that a lot of states gave the parole board much more latitude for capital murders, and we passed another bill that gave the parole board discretion of not reviewing anybody convicted of capital murder and aggravated sexual assault of a child from anywhere up to 1 to 10 years. And by divine intervention, the first person who was the recipient of a maximum 10-year set-off was Elmer Wayne Henley. Can't script that, can you? So for families, I'm going to tell you why we started doing a victim video impact project. And David Schwartz is here. David, you can stand up because you were the impetus for this. I know you're here for the cookies, but and the food. David Schwartz's case, the person that murdered his son and a friend of his son was on the run for 21 years from 1994, was eventually extradited back 2015, stood trial 2017, and was given essentially a 60-year sentence for both murders. That particular offender will be parole eligible in the year 2044. Now, let's be realistic, and I don't mean to be, to put a dimmer on this, but the reality of David and Debbie Schwartz being around in 2040, I don't know. I already know I'm going to be here because I already booked an appointment to meet with the parole board in 2044. So I thought, how do we preserve their voice? How do we preserve their testimony? Because many families are now will be dealing with parole issues years and decades down the road. I thought it's very important to get them recorded. So we, Sydney wrote the grant. I don't write anything. So Sydney wrote the grant, and we ended up getting funded to do victim video impact parole. We're the first one to be able to do this. And we did 20 back in 2021, and we're doing another half a dozen this year as well. So you'll get an idea of kind of what we do. Are we ready to roll?
Ready.
All right, rock and roll. This video is possible by Crime Stoppers of Houston through a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice. This allows victims to make sure that their voice will always be heard throughout the parole process.
I just didn't know how lucky I was. He was a great son. I know he would have been a great man. What happened was just terrible. On March 11th, he was 18. May the 31st, his life was over.
It was just, we just couldn't believe it. And we're just thinking, we're picking this up, we're looking at this, and we're seeing all this, and it's just like, this can't be happening. I mean, we had plans to do stuff.
All her life, I tried to protect her. And for someone just to come and take her life, a split second, just 5 minutes from my house. Just 5 minutes from my house.
I just remember going into that room where the Ingrandos were, the Ingrandos family. And her, she said to me, man didn't make it. Man didn't make it. I'm so sorry.
I don't know if there's a word for it. Not angry. It goes much deeper than that. It's like revisiting that dark time in your soul where you're trying to come to grips with the fact that your daughter that you loved so much was murdered by this person sitting there?
It was a rape kit. It had duct tape, a pacifier, children's socks, rope, several other items that would be used to commit kidnapping and sexual assault.
I hope the people, the parole board, because they're all human also, I don't see how in the heck they could even think about releasing him.
He should never be let out again. What I'm feeling, I don't wish this on nobody. And for him to be let out again and, have that risk happening again, it's terrifying.
Never let him out. He's a threat to society. He will kill again. He's killed before. I know he's killed before. He just got caught this time.
I do not want them to consider giving him a parole ever.
He's an habitual offender. And if it was to the parole board, their daughter, their sister, their niece, how would they feel? Would they feel the same way I felt when I found out that my daughter was almost kidnapped and raped with someone that had 26 prior convictions for the same offense?
So there you have it. I mean, I'm probably more proud of this than anything that I've done, to be able to preserve everybody's voice somewhere down the road. And one of those cases that you heard right there, some people might remember Drew Goldberg in what was called the Wig Shop. Or this will be his first time up for parole. He has served 24 years of a 48-year sentence. And the daughters are now, this is their first time being engaged in the parole process. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to meet in person, but if not, we have this video that would be preserved for a lifetime. So I'm darn proud of this, and I'd like to thank our staff at Crime Stoppers for making all this happen, because this is truly a collaborative team effort, and we're going to be talking about this next month at a statewide conference, because we want to do not what we're just doing in Harris County, but we think it should be done throughout the state of Texas. Thank you.
Andy, thank you for sharing this innovative new way to make lasting victims' voices for our victims, next of kin, and survivors in our community. Truly, truly impressive. I think it's worth noting that this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week of nationwide theme is victims' voices. And what we are trying to achieve here today is to give victims a voice who have not had an opportunity to speak before, and to teach others in our community how they can have a voice in the process as well. I am thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Libby Hamilton. She is a victim advocate who works for the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. She helps victims find their voice in the post-conviction advocacy world. Thank you, Libby, for being with us here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Byram and DA Ogg. When you asked me to be here today, it truly was an honor, because I have been fortunate enough in the past to work with Karen and Lynn and Mr. Graham, and this job really means a lot to me. I'm just very, very happy to be here. This year's theme, exactly what you said, Celeste, the survivors' voices, that is what my job is all about. There's an entire parole board of decision makers, and I'm the victim person. That is my sole job. Me and my team are there specifically post-conviction to help survivors through what can be a very lengthy, a very anxiety-inducing, re-traumatizing process. I worked, many of you are probably familiar with TDCJ Victim Services. That's where victims and survivors register and receive notifications. And I worked for VSD for many, many years. And then in 2016, I found found myself in Huntsville talking to the chairman of the parole board, who felt very strongly that there should be a victim program dedicated to helping victims specifically with the parole review process because of how challenging that can be. So a few months later, the Victim Liaison Program was born, thanks to VOCA grants, which we all love, right? And the governor's office has been amazingly supportive. We're on our 6th year. We now have 5 full-time victim liaisons throughout the state, from Amarillo down. We are slowly but surely growing and trying to improve the overall experience that victims and survivors have, not just at the beginning, but long after. As we've mentioned, you know, sometimes it's a few months later, sometimes it's decades later when the offender becomes eligible for parole. So we want to be there regardless of when that happens and when you might need assistance. There are options that we want to make you aware of, whether that be submitting letters and emails. The victims who are statutorily defined as next of kin, actual victims, guardian of minor victims, do have the right to speak via Zoom, speak in person, talk by phone with the lead voter. So there's a lot of educating we can do. DA's office has been amazing with inviting myself and our chairman and his chief of staff into their office to do trainings and really open up the communication lines of how we can improve things from the get-go. So I'm very appreciative to be here. I will stick around and I'd be happy to answer any questions if y'all have any particular issues or concerns about the parole review process. And thank you all again for your time.
Thank you. I know many of you have heard the pleas that our survivors and next of kin. You heard Mrs. Watley, you heard Lynn Tucker, you heard this plea for your assistance, that after you leave here today, please consider writing a parole protest letter regarding Casey. If you want to know how to do that, all you have to do on your way out, stop by the Harris County District Attorney's Office Victim Services table. I've put together a handy guide that tells you how you, an ordinary citizen, you don't have to be a victim, you don't have to be a next of kin, you don't have to be a survivor, but if you want to make a difference in this way, stop by the table, pick up one of these forms. It tells you how you can register to be notified when an offender is up for parole consideration. It gives you information about how to write that parole protest letter, where to send it after you're done, and it has the information regarding the offender that we're talking about here today, Larry Casey, which needs to be included in any parole protest letter. You are welcome to chat with Libby or myself if you need some direction after this event. But before we do that, I want to introduce 2 very important speakers, 2 survivors of Larry Casey's solicitation of capital murder. We have retired Harris County Assistant District Attorney Burt Graham and retired HPD Officer David Sheets, who are here to talk about their experience with Larry Casey and why parole protest letters are so important and are a significant part of the post-conviction process.
Go ahead, Bert. I don't need a microphone, I don't think.
All right. First, I want to thank Kim Ogg, DA Kim Ogg, and Celeste, and all the staff from the DA's office and Crime Stoppers people for allowing or putting this on. Extremely important to those of us that are still living under threat from some of these people in the penitentiary. Back in 1973, the Supreme Court declared our capital murder death penalty statute unconstitutional, I think around January or so of 73, and then 2 months later, Larry Casey shot a woman clerk at a drive-in grocery in a robbery, said to a reporter later in the Chronicle that he shot her because he was afraid she might identify him, and he knew there was no death penalty statute available at the time. And then 2 months later or so, in April, he committed the mass shooting of the girls coming home from Red Elementary and Ms. Davis in her front yard. There was 6 months there in time, as was mentioned earlier, that there was no death penalty in the state of Texas. Since 1836, I think that was the only time there was not a death penalty available for someone that committed that particular crime in the state of Texas. So that's when he committed these crimes. So he's eligible for parole because of that. He got a 99-year sentence from the jury in this Red Elementary case. He came up for parole pretty quickly. He got excellent good time. He's an excellent prisoner. He's very, very believable. If you talk to him, he spoke in court after the case that David and I were victims in. He could convince you he's your best friend. I think he apologized for causing us problems. But he did this, attempted to kill us 30 years after he killed these little girls coming home from school. So he demonstrated what he will do if he gets out. And yet, to my shock, less than a year ago, the parole board voted not to let him out that time, but to lower his set-off time from 5 years to 3 years. Set-off meaning the next time he will be considered for parole. And as mentioned earlier, they had a choice of, I think, anywhere from 1 to 5 years, and in the past they set it off 5 years. This time, for whatever reason, they set it off only 3 years, which, as I understand it, when people are finally released, it's usually after a set-off like this. So it concerns me greatly that they somehow believe he's ready to be released, or at least somebody thinks he might be. I can't imagine how anybody could even consider that, considering that he demonstrated 30 years after he'd been allegedly reformed and was a perfect prisoner, institutionalized, that he was then tried to kill David and me. So that's my concern each time he comes up for parole. David knew him before I did, before any of us did, I guess, in the 60s. And David and I had the distinction of being the two people on the indictment in 2004 when he was indicted for solicitation of capital murder. And we were the victims of his attempt to kill us. He hatched a scheme while in prison to have someone else kill us, and a sting was set up, and he ended up hiring an investigator, undercover police officer, and they made a case, and he was convicted. And because of the brave women in this room, some of them that came to that trial and testified, Lynn and Karen testified in punishment, and I think largely because of that, or at least partially because of that, he received a life sentence. And he came up for parole again like 8 years later because he wasn't convicted of a capital murder. I have no doubt if he was tried, if we had the same law we have now back in 1973, he would have received maybe not the death penalty, probably, if not, then life without parole, which is an important fact to consider. If he had committed it today, he would, without any doubt in my mind, receive either the death penalty or life without parole, where there is no consideration ever of parole. So how they can consider it now is just beyond me. And I hope more reasonable minds will prevail the next time he comes up for parole, which is just 2 years from now. Dave?
Hey, I appreciate it.
You don't need-
No, I don't need that. I want to reiterate on several things that Bert had to say, but first of all, I want to thank everybody. There's too many people to call them out one by one that put this gathering today. To remember those that have passed in that killing and honor our survivors that are here today. I may step on some toes here, but those of you that are here, You may want to talk to the survivors afterwards. If they want to talk to you, that's fine. If they don't, please understand their feelings. Let me tell you a little bit about Larry Casey. He's a dirtbag, okay? First time I arrested Larry Casey was 66 or 1967. I don't recall the year. And he made bonds, little petty stuff actually. And then again in the 70s I arrested him. And he was able to make bond again. He gets picked up for impersonating a police officer. He made bond again. He burglarized the place and made bond again. And then he went on this killing spree. As far as we know, he's only killed little girls and elderly women. He's chicken, okay? He didn't have, I mean, that's, you don't, in my career, if you mess with a little girl or children or an elderly, I have no sympathy for you, whatever happens. It was like Bird said a while ago, after he was tried for solicitation and capital murder for both of us, he was given 2 life sentences. But in my opinion, life means life. And you can help on that with this guideline that's going to be out on the table out there, how to write some letters to the parole board requesting that they never deny him. The last time he came up, I was told, well, he's getting old. Hell, I am too. I want to live my life out, and I'm sure Bert wants to live his life out. But for the deeds that he did, he deserved to die. If they didn't execute him, he needs to spend the rest of his life in prison. I jotted down some things a while ago, but I forgot what I even wanted to do. But I'd like to thank everybody for the help that put this together. Godspeed to our survivors and condolences to the mother over here. Please do your part. Support stronger legislation that will either keep these people in the prison for life or the death penalty. Thank you. Bert?
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your perspective. And I think that we'll have some time for questions during the reception afterwards. Thank you. At this time, we have a plaque presentation. Donna Owens, who is an alumni of Red Elementary School, who was attended Red Elementary School at the time of this incident, has created a plaque that recognizes and remembers those who were lost and those who survived, and those unnamed victims, the countless children who witnessed things that day, who were affected that day, and who still live with that trauma today. So Donna, if you will come forward, and representing Red Elementary School is educator Cornelia Greer. Donna, if you'll hand the plaque to Ms. Greer, and then smile for the cameras together. Thank you, ladies. We appreciate it. And with that, I appreciate that some of you may have questions. Everyone will certainly be available outside during the reception to answer any questions you may have, whether it's about the victim advocacy process, whether it's about the parole protest process. For those of you who are new to learning about this tragic incident that happened 50 years ago, we have information posted outside, news articles from that time period that give more details that I encourage you to read so that you fully understand the horrific crime that happened that day. But with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here to celebrate National Crime Victims' Rights Week with the Harris County District Attorney's Office and Crime Stoppers. Thank you to Crime Stoppers for being such a gracious host for this event. Thank you to everyone in the Victim Services Division who has helped me over the past few weeks put this together. I could not have done it without you. But most importantly, thank you to our victims, our survivors, and our next of kin who came here, shared your voices with us here today. We are so greatly appreciative of you taking the time and effort to do that. I know that what we were asking you to do was not easy, but you were appreciated, you were supported, and we are here for you. So thank you very much. And with that, we are in adjournment. Thank you.